Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about Gustav Mahler. I think it's the first time on this channel we've really gone for this as a topic, and in particular we're going to talk about his Fifth Symphony and the Adagietto, famous Adagietto from that symphony. And you've just seen a clip of Visconti's Death in Venice, which made the theme of the Adagietto so famous. It was the period at the end of the 1960s, early 70s, when Mahler suddenly became enormously popular, and his popularity remains to this day. Quite right too, but during his lifetime he really wasn't a popular composer and remained unpopular until the 1960s, when composer conductors like Leonard Bernstein and Pierre Boulez began to champion his work. Of course, now he's one of the most popular composers in the entire orchestral repertoire. So let's talk about the Fifth Symphony and what's going on there, and try to explain a little bit the context for the famous Adagietto. Then I'm going to try and score read it from the score, almost demonstrating while I do it something about what we do when we read from scores, and at the same time trying to make sense of the music. Loki's with me. This is the Music Professor channel. I didn't say that to start with. If you like the content of these videos, because they go into music in some depth and hopefully in a relatively entertaining and spontaneous way, then please like and subscribe, and please consider donating to the channel, because all your donations are so gratefully received, and we have a wonderful growing body of patrons. So please join that group, because the more the merrier, and it really helps us and keeps the channel afloat. So thank you. Mahler 5. Well, Mahler, he's an extraordinary figure, because here's somebody who was prodigiously amazing musician and a very great composer, and achieved, he'd already written kind of 10-ish symphonies. He was well underway with the 10th symphony when he died. And of course, Das Lied von der Erde, the Song of the Earth, is also sort of like a symphony, so that's another one. There are 11 symphonies really. There's also an amazing early cantata called Das Klagenderlied, and then there's a whole bunch of songs. So the gist of Mahler is he writes songs and he writes symphonies, and the mix of those two elements in his work is really at the hub of what we're talking about today, because the Fifth Symphony, rather like the fourth that comes before it, brings those two genres together, the symphony and the song, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The staggering thing about Mahler, something to bear in mind, is that by the time he was my age, he had been dead for 7 years, because he died at the age of 50. He was the principal conductor of the New York Philharmonic at that stage, so he was living in New York, suddenly realised that he wasn't well, and in fact the doctor had said, your heart condition is not curable, you need to go home. And he took a liner back to Europe. He went to Paris first to see if he could be treated, but it was too late, and he went back to Austria to die in a sanatorium. He was age 50. I mean, astonishing. So younger than Beethoven. Really, he numbers among the really young composers, I'd say, because 50 is really no age to die if you're a composer of that caliber. But he could have died sooner, because he always had ill health, and in fact, the year he began work on the Fifth Symphony, 1901, he just had a severe hemorrhage, and his doctor told him that if it had continued for a few more days, he would have died. So, this is somebody who's struggling with ill health all his life. And at the same time, as he recovers from this particular illness, when he's working on the Fifth Symphony, there's a real sense that he's in the prime of his life. He even said so. He said that the symphony was the product of someone in the prime of life, and that's very much the impression he gets, full of energy. It's full of a kind of life-affirming quality, which is unique to Mahler's middle period music. And he's really alongside, it's paradoxical, because alongside the ill health and the frailty, Mahler is this prodigiously energetic person, and I think the two are connected. He works too hard, he's an obsessive, compulsive worker. He spends most of his time conducting. He's a great conductor. A bit like I said about Rachmaninoff in the last video, who was equally a world-class pianist and a very fine conductor and a composer. Mahler's a bit like that too. He's a world-class conductor. He's also a composer. Perhaps more composer than conductor, but the two seem to be sort of enmeshed. You can't really separate them, and the reason why Mahler's such a great composer for the orchestra is because he understands the orchestra from the inside, as a professional, as a consummate symphony orchestra conductor. And here's somebody who's worked his way up. You know, one of the comments about Rachmaninoff was that he's sort of, it's the music of the bourgeoisie and so on. Well, Mahler's somebody who really worked his way up from the most humble origins. He was born to a Jewish family living in Bohemia, right on the edges of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He always felt himself to be an absolute outsider. And he works his way through a succession of provincial opera posts, directing smallish companies, but getting bigger and bigger, ends up getting the biggest job in Europe, which is he becomes director of the Vienna Court Opera and simultaneously of the Vienna Philharmonic, probably the big job. Later he is sort of pushed out of that job mainly because of anti-Semitism, and takes up his last post as chief conductor of the New York Phil. So we're talking about somebody who's really one of the first of the modern conception of what a great conductor is, you know, big jobs and internationally sought after as a sort of major interpreter of the orchestral repertoire. And then only in his spare time during his summer holidays does he have a chance to compose. And that's when he goes back to his big villa in Carinthia on the shores of a big lake, and there he composed. So the Fifth Symphony was composed in this big villa. He'd recently acquired this villa, and I think he's very proud of the fact that there he was, a lad from relatively poor background, having finally attained, you know, this significant status and living in a big house. And he's very proud of it. He was proud that he'd attained this big post in Vienna and he was able to afford to live in a big house. Funnily enough, his big rival, Richard Strauss, is something similar. You know, he had his big villa at Garmisch that he bought after he composed Salome. So these composers are very proud of having made it, you know. It's very human, isn't it? I know some people would say great artists shouldn't think like that, but I'm afraid they do. And Mahler lived in this big house, but he wasn't idle in his big house. He used his time living there to compose, and he had a little hut sort of in the woods near the lake, where he would go in total solitude and write. And the Fifth Symphony, I'm going to distill it really quickly. It really falls into three parts. That's how Mahler saw it. So it has 5 movements, but essentially it's in 3 parts. So I'll explain how that works. You get the first 2 movements, which are sort of funereal and dark and full of tempestuous, agonizing things. And they're thematically connected, the first and the second movement. Then in the middle, and then you're supposed to have a pause after the second movement, as if the first part of the triptych is over. Then you go into this huge third movement, which is the second part of the symphony, and that's an enormous, the biggest scherzo that had ever been composed at that time, an enormous kind of symphonic poem of a piece, a huge kind of Knabenwunderhorn piece. Das Knabenwunderhorn is this collection of folk poems, sort of quasi-folk poetry of German Romanticism. Mahler was obsessed with it. And the horn itself is the instrument, in a sense, of German Romanticism, with its lovely mellow sound and its evocation of lost worlds and the woods and the forests and nature and so forth. And the horn, the French horn, is the centre of Mahler's orchestra, and in this scherzo it's sort of like a horn concerto. It's absolutely dominated by the sound of the horn. And then that eventually comes to an end, and then you have movements 4 and 5. This Adagietto that I'm going to talk about now, which is a sort of love song. Do you remember I said at the beginning that in this symphony brings together symphony and song? This is a song but without words, and I'll explain why and what that means. And then the finale, which is absolutely energetic and sort of triumphant and full of technical prowess. He'd been studying the works of J.S. Bach a lot. And the reason why composers get into Bach, everyone gets into Bach at some point in their lives, is because Bach, of all composers, mastered the two essential components of musical material. One is the vertical, the chords, if you like, the vertical results when you put a bunch of notes together. What do I mean by vertical? Vertical is the kind of harmony that results from these lines moving around. And in Bach, you can't really tell whether he's thinking more linearly or more vertically. The two are in absolutely perfect balance. The harmony is exquisite and profound and wonderful. And then when you look at the lines, you see that all the lines are perfect as well, which is why when you look at even a Bach chorale, it's just perfect both as a set of four lines and as harmonic result, if that makes sense. So Mahler was studying Bach and learned a great deal from those studies, and the last movement of the symphony is full of counterpoint and full of a kind of joy of a sort of polyphonic way of writing. So, okay, that's the finale, and the finale it sort of speeds up melodies from the Adagietto, so they come back, but in a kind of quick, happy form. So let's go back to the Adagietto. That's our topic today, and the Adagietto, William Mengelberg, the conductor who was a friend of Mahler's, said that Mahler said to him that the Adagietto was a love letter to Alma, the woman who he was about to marry, the famous Alma Mahler. She was only 22. They met in 1901 and he proposed, I think, at the end of that year, and they were married quite early in 1902. So exactly the time when this symphony is being written. So this symphony is absolutely enmeshed with the first flowering of Mahler's love affair with Alma Schindler. Alma Schindler was an incredibly intelligent, ferociously opinionated. She was a woman with incredibly strong ideas. She was very beautiful. She was much admired by the Viennese intelligentsia. She really was the young woman who everyone wanted at their parties. And lots and lots of artists fell in love with her. But she became, if you like, a sort of trophy wife for Gustav Mahler. And I'm not going to go into the weird complications of their relationship and their subsequent marriage, but it wasn't easy for either of them, let's put it that way. But at this stage in their relationship, Gustav Mahler's clearly bowled over by Alma, and he wrote this little poem for her, which seems to be a kind of concealed text for the song without words that is the Adagietto. He's not the only great Austro-German composer of this period to do this. Alban Berg, who's the next generation of Viennese composer and a sort of disciple of Mahler's in some ways, he did the same kind of thing. When he wrote his lyric suite for string quartet, he originally wrote it as a setting of Baudelaire and then suppressed the text. So it's almost this idea, but both pieces were written as kind of about a secret love, if you like. Berg's was a secret love for a woman called Hannah Fuchs. Mahler, well, it's sort of let's say if it wasn't a secret love for Alma, he didn't want to be explicit by actually bringing a soprano onto the stage to sing it. He'd done that in the Fourth Symphony when the soprano comes in and sings this lovely song from Das Knaben Wunderhorn in the finale. Doesn't happen in the Fifth. He wanted the Fifth to be an instrumental symphony. He didn't want to sort of resort to voices as he had in the previous three symphonies. And so here he chooses not to, but I think he sort of wanted it as a private communication with Alma. And the text, let's just look at it, and forgive my terrible German. Here it is. So the text is this: Wie ich dich liebe, du meine Sonne, ich kann mit Worten dich's nicht sagen, which means in English, in which way I love you, my sunbeam, wie ich dich liebe, du meine Sonne. I cannot tell with words, ich kann mit Worten dir's nicht sagen. Only my longing, my love and my bliss, nur meine Sehnsucht kann ich dir klagen. Can I with anguish declare, und meine Liebe, meine Wonne. Well, that's the translation here anyway. So how does that fit to the tune? You'll see that it does. Wie ich dich liebe, du meine Sonne. In which ways I love you, my sunbeam. Ich kann mit Worten dir's nicht sagen. I cannot tell you with words. Nur meine Sehnsucht, only my longing, kann ich dir klagen. Now, I don't quite know how he might want to set this third line, but I've given you a sort of attempt at that. And then maybe the Und meine Liebe, meine Wonne goes into the next phrase of the tune. It's not entirely, since he never wrote it down as part of the piece. I'm just speculating, but it seems likely that that is a suppressed text that means something to Mahler, means something to Alma, no one else knows about it. Composers like this kind of thing, a sort of secret communication. And so that seems to be what's going on in this wonderful music. Now, the other thing that's very striking and very noticeable when you go to a live performance is the Fifth Symphony is for this enormous and magnificently scored orchestra, doing all kinds of wonderful things, the percussion, the brass, the wind instruments are shooting around. And then they all fall silent, except in this movement for the strings and the harp. That's all that the movement has. It's like it's a very conscious decision to strip everything away, and you're just left with the essence, if you like, of the romantic core of the orchestra, the strings. And the strings, of course, in a certain way have a unique sensitivity to their sound, which is produced literally by the fingers touching strings and the bow. There's something absolutely tactile and sort of sensuous about the way string instruments operate, and you get this wonderful, intimate music. And then, of course, the harp, which is the instrument that is, to some extent, the instrument of romance, and like a lyre, you know, the ancient Greek instrument, it has this ancient association with the song. So this is a song without words for strings and harp. Okay, let's look at it. So I'm going to start playing, and we're going to be looking at the score. I'm afraid it may cover Loki, but there we are. So wonderful opening where Mahler just, out of this hushed pianissimo C, he kind of draws music out of it. I should say this movement is so iconic because of its association with Death in Venice, but also because of Leonard Bernstein's famous recording of it, which is incredibly slow, some would say indulgently slow. He also played it at John F. Kennedy's funeral, and it has this association, I suppose, with elegy, with something about death that I don't think it originally had for Mahler. I don't think it has that. In the Mahler text, what you're conscious of, let me just refer to Mahler's poem again, what you're conscious of is this idea of love, which comes from longing. In which way I love you, my sunbeam, I cannot tell you with words. It's a love that goes beyond words, hence we can't actually have words. This is deeper than words. That's a lovely way of expressing it, simply not to have the words at all. Only my longing, my love and my bliss can I with anguish declare. So this is love that's sort of impelled out of a kind of longing, a yearning for the beloved. It's that sort of idea. So this is music that's supposed to be from the heart. And so we've got this sort of gentle, quiet thing. Mahler starts with a third, just a minor third. We've talked a lot recently about pieces of music, not least Beethoven's Fifth, that begin with a third, and there's a tonal ambiguity about it because you don't know what the third means. Is it, for example, in A minor? What is the third? What's the root of this thing? And harp comes in, like that, one, two, this is all pianissimo. Harp starts to roll down the thirds. It's very, very beautiful, this idea of the accompaniment coming from the middle of the register of the harp and then dropping. Lovely, lovely thing to do, because normally accompaniments roll upwards, don't they? But this is rolling down, and we don't know what the tonic is. We don't know where we are tonally. It's a beautiful opening, and I'll just play it. Cellos come in, first violin starts to sing, and then there's the resolution. So now what's beautiful here is the handling of the harmony. He doesn't go, you know, that sounds somehow ludicrous and classical. There's no, in fact, there's no dominant at all. There's just these thirds, and then that, do you notice that's a pentatonic chord? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's almost looking forward to Mahler's late style with Das Lied von der Erde in the 9th Symphony, where he starts using a lot of pentatonic scales. And so in tonal terms, it's almost like a sort of cluster of, it's very beautiful, just a pentatonic cluster which evokes a sort of natural world somehow, because the pentatonic scale does that. It has resonances of folk music and simplicity, and I think this is typical of Mahler, this quest for a kind of divine simplicity. There it is, there's the 5 notes, and the harp rolls up. Isn't that beautiful? That B flat, that yearning B flat, and then there's a D there. There's C in the second violins, F in the violas, D in the second viola. So it's again a pentatonic chord. This is why this harmony is so beautiful. A pentatonic chord going to that resolution, and then another pentatonic chord, no dominant at all, just that pentatonic thing. Bass drops to A, first inversion. That's really the first time we get a real sense of F major, which is the key. So F minor, and then wonderful half close, if you like, on the dominant 7th of C. Now here's a marvelous thing. Look at this viola part, because as the melody drops to be natural, look at the viola, look at this counterpoint. It shouldn't work, should it? That C sharp. It's so dissonant, that weird 9th, but it's magnificent because the voices are pulling downwards. G minor, ba, second violins, low violas going down to that C, and then we hit a sus4, a suspension. Suspensions are a very old-fashioned thing. Even in Renaissance music, you'd have let's say a tonic chord, and then you move into a dissonant chord by that note hanging over from the previous chord, creating what we call a suspension, which needs to be resolved. So this is Mahler using a very ancient thing. Here's the suspension, and the harp plays up the suspension. It doesn't really resolve though. He doesn't go, it'd be too cheesy, wouldn't it, to resolve. He doesn't do that. It's much more interesting than that. It's simply, he just holds that suspension like a symbol of something yearning for resolution, but doesn't. And then the cellos take over. You noticed the first phrase was the first violins low down on the G string. This is now the cellos, quite relatively high or middle to high, the most sort of singing part of the cello. Very, very beautiful. They take over the suspension, and the chord over the top of that, rather ambiguous, almost like A minor. It's very lovely. He doesn't have a dominant, 7th there. He just has this sort of pentatonic feel. Wonderful. And then it goes into half speed, in effect. Look at this. The melody is now in minims instead of crotchets. It's magnificent. Makes it twice as expressive somehow. cellos at the top, and then we've got violas are divided into two, going in a different direction. Sorry, there's cellos at the top, violas divided. Ah, so beautiful though, isn't it? Let me play that again, because I went slightly wrong with that. Here it is. Turn towards A minor, but then very beautifully interrupts that. Back to F major. Neapolitan. A minor. Wonderfully dark and sort of tragic. That's the second violins taking over there. And then resolving into very dark A minor, beautifully scored. Look, the A minor here is just basses. Look at those divided basses, the C and the basses. Second violins on that A, and then the violas coming in. And the cellos underneath. Da, 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 da. Absolutely tragic, really, somehow, that feeling. A minor. Now the ambiguity of the original thirds is back. First violins come in pianissimo. And then we come back to our melody for the third time. Beautiful spacing on that chord with the high third. Look at these cellos going C sharp, F sharp against the harp. The harmony is becoming more anguished, I suppose. That chord again. Look at that G sharp there in the violas. And then we get the C sharp in the cellos, B flat minor. And then all hell breaks loose here, where the harp is rushing upwards, but the strings are all rushing downwards. Cellos, second violins, cellos, violas, they're all going bonkers here. Now this is because we've reached this really important chord in all classical music, which is the second inversion, which always precedes a cadence point. So this wonderful climactic moment happened in Rachmaninoff, didn't it? In a recent video we saw the same sort of thing. There's the thrill of the second inversion, and then the first violins reaching their cadence on the second beat, which impels a new phrase. In the second violins, very modestly scored here. And then the final resolution of that opening section. Harp begins its downward rolling figure again. And here we are into the middle section, sort of a developmental middle section with this kind of da-da-da in the cellos. And it's kind of, what is it? It's D minor, actually. It's sort of, we know that really it's F6, but there's no C in there, so it's ambiguous. It's D minor, and then a second marvelous diminished chord, and then C minor. We haven't been here before, da 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 da, and another emphatic sort of da da da, another grace note thing, da ba da, and another one. Right, magnificent augmented triad underneath these appoggiatures, marvelous, romantic, marvelous. just gorgeous harmony. And then typical Mahler interrupted cadence, because what you expect there, something like that, sort of a B flat minor resolution, but it's much better what he does, of course, which is this, G flat major, and the second violins and the violas have this beautiful little duo there. Now we're in a different register, sort of rather ethereal. And then look at this beautiful chord here. It's a sort of ninth, but without the third, without the fifth, just the seventh and the ninth, beautifully scored. We're in G flat major, far away. So it's a semitone below the original tonic, and it's got this lovely sort of simplicity about it. Almost sort of religious character, like a hymn, slightly angelic because it's so high up. Da da da. Right, here's one of these da-da-dum things. Cellos do that, violas do that, second violins do that. So a magnificent sound, isn't it? That. Now we go into octaves, A flat minor. We've got the octaves at the top, very dissonant. I mean, that's really just a kind of yearning appoggiatura, but with the octave displacement, the ba 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 octave drop, and then it goes to the dominant seventh of E flat minor. Circle of fifths back to da. Look at this counterpoint. Cellos doing this, and the divided violas underneath. Lovely counterpoint. I'll do the first of those, and he does it again. Look at the bass. That's really marvelously dissonant, but perfect because it's sort of E major, and then sort of a similar thing with the two and then we've got and now we've again, the sort of absolute simplicity of this, song-like simplicity of it, with that beautiful added sixth chord. Violas at the bottom of this. Look at this. Second violins are just behind the firsts, and then the chord shifts down chromatically, and the seconds are just like a little echo behind the first, and then this is kind of magical. Look at this. Where's this going? And then it's just virtually just harp with the first violins and the violas, and there's a sort of a glissando, which I can't do on the piano, down to the C, and we're back at the beginning, as it were, with the second violins taking the melody for the first time, and the melody's different. Wonderfully still. Oh, sorry, no. Let me do that again. Different melody, slightly. Da 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 da. Let me get that right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So just subtly different rhythms. Look at the cellos taking over here for the first time. Da, just echoing that phrase on the dominant, just to make it different and somehow be even more expressive than the first time. And we're stuck on the C. First violins, second violins, cellos. Seems to go on forever, just stuck on that. Oh, second violins are slowly going up the tune. And now we've got the first violins coming down. Cellos rising to the C sharp. There's the B flat minor. We've got this high A, it's magnificent. Harp is going crazy. All this business. So, and then the whole orchestra, string orchestra, second violins going up as the cellos drop. And there's our second inversion. Sort of still got that pentatonic flavour. It's wonderfully diatonic. There's no chromaticism, just this magnificent. And then we drop right down in the range of right almost to the bottom of the violins. Dominant seventh, but you've never heard a dominant seventh voiced quite like that. No third, just the seventh, the tonic and the fifth and the bass. The bass drops to the tonic. We're left with this huge suspension for, a whole bar, and then finally that resolves into this lovely, rich, open F major with the 10th. It's so bold. Magnificent writing. Now, of course, on some level, just going into the anatomy of the music like this with me talking through it and playing, sort of just bashing from the score, it seems like a sacrilege. I'm sorry if it is. But I think sometimes when you just look at how something's made, you love it even more. And I really disagree with people who say that analysis or discussion about music makes it less emotional. I think the opposite. Whenever I listen to music, I'm always in floods of tears because actually the analysis just deepens your relationship to the music. Just like if you study a Shakespeare play, it doesn't lose something when you then see it live. You just know it better. And then you can sort of park. You don't think analytically while you're watching the play. It's the same with music. You know stuff, but you park that and you just listen to it and you know it better. You know it more intimately. This is great literature. It needs to be known properly inside. That's how we get to understand great works of art. This is a great work of art. So I'm sort of unapologetic about that. But of course, this is wonderful, spontaneous music that communicates primarily to our emotions. We don't necessarily have to understand the mechanism, but I think it makes it even more exciting if we do. Thanks for listening, and please like... Oh, Loki was just saying thank you as well. Thank you for the likes and the subscriptions. Please tell us your thoughts about Mahler and emotion and analysis and anything else that's come up in this discussion. Thank you for watching.